Welcome back to another episode of Getting Personal. I'm here today with Matt, marketing manager at the Game of Silks. How's it going today, Matt? It's really great to have you, man.
Yeah, going good, Jack. Thanks for having me on the show today, and looking forward to diving into it.
Absolutely. Officially our first cross-chain guest at Getting Personal. So I'm very excited to dive in. Before we do get into the Game of Silks and a bit about your personal journey, I'd love to hear from your perspective as marketing manager at the Game of Silks. What's your pulse right now on the current state of Web3, NFTs? Like, how do you see the ecosystem at large as we sit here today?
Yeah, I mean, we're about a little over a week away from the happening right now, so things are definitely, they've been heating up for sure the last couple months. I'd say the gaming sector and Web3 is definitely blowing up. I was on a Twitter space yesterday, actually, where I was talking about this, like when you look at the gaming sector in Web3, it compared to overall gaming, it's really small. It's like, a drop in the bucket. So the topic we were talking about was collaborations in Web3, and just kind of how do you get more people who are in Web3 to start playing your game? And I was going on saying, there's a lot of games right now competing for a small user base, and I believe that there's a lot of unique kind of traits or like aspects to each of these games outside the fact that they're just on blockchain. So whether you're a shooter, or a real world horse racing game like us, there's something out there that people, besides the fact that you're on blockchain, can relate to your game. So trying to bring those people, and bringing them into Web3, and then that'll grow, the kind of Web3 gaming user base, and hopefully in a few years it's less competitive amongst Web3 games for Web3 players.
How do we bridge that gap? Like, how do we make that drop? How do we fill that bucket, right? Because we see that topic talked about quite often, how the gaming industry is massive, but the audience that we have in Web3 is not quite there yet. And how do we bring those everyday gamers, right? What's the how do you see that?
Um, Again, I content, I'd say content is the biggest thing. And how do we get content? I mean, a lot of that comes from completed games. We're a lot of games, and we're still really early in the space. There's not too many playable, like fully playable Web3 games, but the ones that are out there, like there's Shrapnel, Big Time. There's a few games that do have playable, and they're you're seeing success for them, and it's kind of like it seems isolated to those projects. But, I say they got a completed game, and they're able to go again and attract that Web2 audience. They're shooters. Whether you're just a gamer, you're going to be interested in a good shooter if it's a good shooter. Now, why would you play a blockchain shooter versus another? That's where you got to kind of teach them. But I think at first it's just working with guys who, there's streamers across Kick, Twitch, all over. It's been huge for decades now. Working with them, getting them interested in your game, and then helping them bring their followers over. And I think once you get them in to play the game for fun, and then they learn that additional part, like why, a Web3 game or blockchain game is so much better than Web2, like they'll be hooked. So just make something fun, be able to show everybody, and bring them in for what's fun, not just the fact that it's a blockchain game.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Talking of fun and games, let's dive into the Game of Silks. For those maybe hearing about it for the first time, what's it all about?
Yeah, great question. We're digitalizing the real world sport of thoroughbred horse racing. So a lot of people come to us, and they don't quite realize that the assets in our game are real world assets. So when you buy a horse in our game, it's a real world racehorse. So when you go to your local track, or if you turn on your television station and watch horse racing, there's a good chance whether you're an owner in Game of Silks or just a regular person who's a fan of the sport, the horses you're racing are owned by somebody in Game of Silks. And then obviously every horse race that runs, you're running for a purse of money. So in our game, you get 1% of the real world earnings. So that still is a pretty decent amount. Kentucky Derby this year announced that they're moving up to $5 million prize purse. So for Game of Silks, the person that owns horses racing there, you're racing for $50,000, in one race. So
Wow.
It's an exciting sport. They say it's the most exciting 2 minutes in sports. So yeah.
And why, like, how did it start? Like, what was the vision initially, and like, why tokenize a sport like horse racing?
Sure. So I'll go to your first, which is why the start, and that'll come down to our founder. So Troy Levy, he's our founder. He's a true horse racing guy first. He owns a couple hundred acres in Kentucky. He owns nearly 100 thoroughbred race horses. So he is deep ingrained in the game of thoroughbred horse racing. He loves horse racing, and he wants to see the sport grow. And that'll go into kind of why we chose blockchain and with our game. And it offers a very unique experience. Owning a horse in the real world is something that's very expensive to do. So being able to have that kind of unique ownership experience, which blockchain allows, there's a lot of games I'd say that use blockchain that don't necessarily use blockchain. But when I look at sports, I see a very good use case for blockchain. And why does Game of Silks need to be on chain versus why doesn't Game of Silks need to just be a Web2 game? And that's the fact that we're dealing with real athletes, real players. These are assets. Just like if you were owning a sports team in any franchise, you don't that opportunity doesn't exist really around in the world. If you play fantasy sports or you go bet on sports, you just kind of get that experience that if the team wins, if your players are successful, it's good, but you don't actually own those players. So unless you are the owner of that team in the real world, you can't there's no game out there that allows you to emulate that experience. So with Game of Silks, we're able to create one of the real world, horse racing industry. Every player in our game, every horse in our game only exists once, just like in the real world. So when you own a horse, you could be strategic in our game, just like you can in the real world, and kind of get that same experience. So,
and you're opening yourself up to the global market as well, right? Because it's all digital. Whereas if you're owning a physical horse, you'd have to be in that region or that town or wherever that horse lives, I imagine.
Exactly, it's a lot more work when you're training real horses versus virtual horses, right? When I own the horse in Game of Silks, the trainers are out there in real world, doing that work. They could only train so many horses, but there's a lot of good horses out there. So in Game of Silks, I don't have to focus my time on training the horse. I just got to focus my time on finding the good ones. So there's a few trainers out there that I like, go buy their horses. If there's a few horses out there I like, I go buy those horses. I don't have to, say, hey, there's one really good horse, spend all my money on it, and put all my time and energy into training that horse and hoping it's successful. It gives you just, you can play the field a little bit more wider.
And how does that relationship work between the owner of the NFT, the digital asset, the horse, and the trainer? Is there a relationship between the two, and how does that? I mean, there clearly is, but how does it work basically between the two?
Yeah. The relationships isn't so close in the sense of they're directly talking to them or working with them. They're aware, obviously, that they're training their horse, and that might play an aspect into why the player in Game of Silks is buying that horse. Some of them actually have reached out to these trainers to get updates on horses, and the trainers have been pretty receptive and giving it back. One part, about horse racing and about our game, is when you have a horse in the real world or when you buy a horse in our game, it races for more than 1 year. It races for multiple years. And when you buy a horse in our game and when a horse racing career starts, it starts at about 2 years old. So that's when we sell the horses as 2-year-olds. And sometimes they might not start racing till 3-year-olds. So that's why they'll go, people in our game will go and try and connect with the trainers, get some updates on how their horses are progressing during their career, their training before they hit the races. But once they start racing, we have all the data from the jockey club, so you get automatic, workout notifications and racing notifications when your horse is doing all that.
Very cool. And you guys have decided to build on Ethereum, right? That's where you've started out. Could you explain why you chose that chain initially, and do you see yourselves bridging out to any other networks at any point for other reasons?
So why we chose initially was pretty, simple decision. When we did our first mint in 2022, Ethereum NFTs kind of had the entire market share. So when you're looking to launch a project, it just, where was the money? Where's the liquidity on Ethereum? That's where it made sense to go. Obviously it's changed I wouldn't say that it's changed a lot over the last 2 years, but there's just been changes in the marketplace. Newer chains have come out where Ethereum has kind of stayed the same. Gas prices have gotten more expensive, and the consumers who are here in Web3 right now have kind of leaned away from that, where they don't want to pay $20, hundreds of dollars for minting an NFT, and that makes sense. And if that's the consumer that's here now, as we get more and more mass adoption, I'm sure. That's how the general population will feel about it. So it's definitely on our radar, whether it's switching around, moving around chain for our current game where we are. I think there's a lot that goes into it. Whether I mentioned gas fees there, but it's there's more that goes into it, right? If you're a new business and you're selecting a chain, I think it's it's one of those decisions that could make or break you. There have been companies who have launched on chains, that ended up not being exactly what they thought they would be, or ended up just no longer being around. And when you're in a startup, being able to have reliable partners and not being subject to that volatility that another business you're solely relying on could cause a lot of issues. That you make sure you make the right decision, because it is a big decision once you move over to that chain. Because if it goes down, that's your game. That's the way you make money. That's the way your business functions. So. And I mean, we've kind of seen that with Solana. I've always been iffy about it, and then just hearing that in March it was 75% of all their transactions were failed. That's a serious issue. I mean, they've been able to keep the gas prices low, but just being able to have transactions up and that Ethereum has never had those issues. So there's a bit of a pros and cons to each move, but I think I don't think Ethereum is the solution long term. So
interesting. Yeah.
I know our tech guys are doing a much better deep dive onto which chain to work at, but I know that there's a lot that go into considering.
Yeah, it's definitely not an easy thing to navigate, like you say, as a startup, as a founder. It's ever changing. It's so fast, right? So yeah, I'd definitely be interested to see how it unfolds for you guys and where you end up. Whether you bridge entirely or maybe you use different chains for different needs that you have. But yeah, exciting for sure. What about you? Let's shift gears to you a little bit. I'd love to hear a little bit about your backstory. What led you to Web3 and also Game of Silks. How did you end up at Game of Silks? Yeah, fire away.
Sure. So I got into Web3, I want to say the summer of 2021, end of the summer, around August. I think I minted my first NFT in September. So, before I got into that, I was doing my own marketing agency, and I was working mainly with e-commerce companies and local businesses and helping them get out there, get their message out there. And then I stumbled across Web3. And I stumbled across NFTs, and I realized how it was mainly just a marketing hype train, and how much marketers were in demand in the space. So I made the choice to kind of move our business into there, away from the e-commerce. Well, we worked the e-commerce for a bit, and then after I think in December is where I was okay, fully Web3. This is it was much more made a lot more sense to be focused in there. I did work with a few projects, and then Game of Silks came on my radar in January of 2022. Spoke with them. When I first spoke to them, it was kind of an eye-opening thing. If you had been in the space 2021, it was kind of just a lot of pump and dumps, get in, get out quick. There wasn't much vision. There wasn't there was hardly any vision. It was a lot of it was, people were coming out with roadmaps even after they do the initial drop, right? But when I got on Game of Silks, this was the first time I was okay, this is something legit. They have a game, they have a business model, they have an experienced team, guys who have done this type of thing before. So I was fully in. I went in, I agreed to do a 2-3 month campaign with them, and then after that first 2-3 months, I was all right, this is Game of Silks is kind of just that needle in a haystack that you find, and I wasn't going to let it pass it up. So I just decided to come on full time with them, and
Nice.
been with them ever since.
Amazing. I'd love to pull on the thread of marketing. With your experience in Web2 marketing and now being full-time Web3, where do they differ in your opinion? How do you see, because Web2 marketing is still a thing, right? But we have Web3 now, and I'm sure there's nuances. So could you touch on some of those? from your experience?
Yeah, I think that the first part is between Web 2 and Web 3 that there's a huge difference in the amount of data that's available. Um, Web 3, there is, and when you go on chain, there's huge amounts of data, but then at the same time, to get that kind of first user stuff that you're used to getting in Web 2, getting their email address, stuff like that, that's been more difficult to get in Web 3. But there's also different marketing kind of avenues, and especially as of late that are coming out, where you're able to kind of advertise on chain to people, to their wallets. There's a lot of great analytic companies that are coming out where you can get these kind of on-chain analytics of your holders, of other collection holders. Try to find where unique people, or where people that are closer to your target audience are, and advertise to them. And I think that there's we're so early in that space, like with targeting wallets, that I'm interested to see where it goes, like personally. And this might be like a little bit out there of an opinion, but when it comes to OpenSea, like I don't see with their current business model how like in 10 years they're still going to be around. I think like where they come is they become like a Google, a search engine for NFTs, and at the same time where projects can go and advertise. So if I know somebody, hey, this person is looking for this NFT and they hold 10 NFTs that are very similar amongst my community, I want to advertise to them when they're on OpenSea. As soon as they connect their wallet, they see a Game of Silks ad, or something like that. That's where I see OpenSea kind of getting to. And I mean, there's already a few out there where you are able to target their wallets, but I think OpenSea would be like obviously like the biggest the biggest website to do it on, and they just get the most traffic, I think, for that Web3 kind of NFT buying audience.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it's kind of like the equivalent of how Facebook draws on certain data points, right, to run ads, or the ads that you would create and pay for. You're saying that a very similar thing is going to happen with on-chain and wallet data, right?
Yeah. And again, that's gonna like users are gonna have to, I guess, decide how private they want to keep it themselves, right? If you are using like one wallet, because the thing about data is like a lot of people find with marketing, they kind of find it kind of predatory. So and I agree with you on that sense. Like a lot of the stuff that you could get in these wallet analytics, like I could come in, before people would come into your project, and I have no clue really whether you're a high quality lead or a low quality lead. But if you come in today and you have your wallet, oh, I could see that this guy has spent $500,000 on NFTs in the last 6 months. I'm gonna treat him a lot different than the guy who comes in, and maybe but has never bought an NFT. I'm gonna go, oh, this guy's got, he's a whale to us. Potentially, we got to make sure we hit him with extra emails, or just give him that kind of white glove service when he first comes into the community. Reach out to him, hey, what did you like about the game? Like, anyway, we can help you. So I think it's going to be interesting. Like we're just kind of getting the tip of the iceberg where all these analytics are starting to become usable, in a sense that you can market with them. And as more avenues open to advertise to wallet addresses, I think it'll come really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited and curious to see as well how that unfolds. Challenges or challenge, biggest challenge for you personally since you've been in Web3. What would it be if you had to pick one? Because I'm sure there's been more than one.
Yeah. I'd say the biggest challenge again is like onboarding users to Web3, especially from where I'd say we are. When it comes to marketing Web3 users, getting people to create a wallet, they don't know how to do that. When you're going to traditional gamers, again, a lot of them are tech savvy, but when you come to us, we're onboarding, real world horse racing fans, not for the most part, but like that is a huge, crossover in our target market. So we're about 50%, focused there. Is how do you get these guys to come in, create a wallet, understand Ethereum, understand blockchain? It's very difficult. And I think that the biggest thing is the wallet creation, is getting over that hump, you know, and then slowly teaching people, hey, because that was the most daunting process. Even when I first got into crypto, my first wallet I created wasn't my wallet that got me fully dived deep into crypto. I don't know where that seed phrase is. I made a couple wallets before I, you know, was deep in. But there's a lot of companies out there. We've partnered with Magic Link, where you could just come in, use your email address, create a password, and it, you know, you create a wallet, and they store your keys for you, and it's secure. So we've partnered with them, and I think that's helped us a ton overcome that initial challenge. And then obviously once you have people who, okay, now they're creating wallets, they're signing up, how do you convert them? And that's a whole separate challenge. And we're working, you know, on tackling that and improving that. It's not, again, it's analytics. And when you come in, when you really want to look at that from the marketing standpoint, it's, okay, hey, these guys, this is what's working. This is what's not. Now I got to start leaning more into this. So as more people coming in, more data that we're getting, we've been able to, you know, learn more about the channels that are successful or not successful and lean more into those. And hopefully from leaning more into those, we're finding more channels and more information that we keep learning from and keep kind of improving our funnel and onboarding new people in the game.
Yeah. And let's say we're 5 years into the future now. The whole onboarding process, the wallet, all of that is now seamless, right? We've moved past that friction. Where would you like to see Game of Silks in 5 years' time?
I mean, five. You know, I guess where I want to see us in 5 years' time is paying out the rewards for every single horse race that happens. You know, right now we are paying out a lot of the horse races inside the U.S. We just expanded to Canada, and you know, we picked up a few smaller races. Not smaller races, big races, but only those kind of meets in the UK. We did one, and we did the Saudi Cup. We did the Dubai World Cup. So again, some international expansion. But for me, like 5 years, it would be awesome if we could be minting every single horse that is a thoroughbred racehorse in the world, and paying out whether they're racing in Japan, the US, the UK. And, you know, to do that, we need to be able to obviously sell all those horses. So that's kind of my goal in 5 years, is to be able to sell enough horses that all the horses that are racing in the world are getting, you know, and comes in Game of Silks, and people that own those horses in our game are winning.
Nice. And how does that onboarding process go? Because on the one hand, you have the users, right, with the whole wallet situation. But when it comes to onboarding a track or races, what does that look like? And is that also a challenge?
Sorry, so you're saying onboarding where?
So when you're trying to get these different races, you said like expanding the different tracks internationally, that whole process.
Yeah, so that's a lot of BD and partnerships, and working with the horse racing industry. You know, a lot of the horse racing data is typically owned by one kind of entity. And for the US, that is the Jockey Club. They've been around. I always tell people the Jockey Club is like the NFL of the football league. You know, they're the commissioner. They run everything. They've been around since like the 1800s. You know, they've been doing it for a long time. Wow. But they provide us with all the data for each workout, every time a horse works out, every time a horse is born, it gets sold, and every time it races, how much it earns. So getting partnerships with people like the Jockey Club here in the US or over in Canada, moving over to the UK, working with them, getting just data providers to help. You know, the data is the biggest thing for our game. So if we're able to get the data for these horse races, we're able to create those NFTs and sell them. So working with each country's individual horse racing kind of association, and
they get it, right? Like they understand that this is the future of horse racing or tokenizing sport in general.
They do. Like you know, the support we've gotten from the horse racing industry is honestly it's been incredible. So I'll talk about a little bit of our partnerships here, and one is with NYRA, the New York Racing Association. They own three of the largest racetracks in the state of New York: Saratoga, Belmont, and Aqueduct Park. And they're also owned by the U.S. They're owned by the state of New York. So they've partnered with us, and part of that, getting partnered with a company that is owned by the city of New York, you have to actually have the government, look in and do some actual checks on your business. So that's a pretty big, kind of, well, I want to say proof point that we're legit. But I mean, between having a partnership with them, having a partnership with the Jockey Club, they've been able to really help us with providing the data. And the Jockey Club, again, they've been pushing and growing. Their whole thing is how to grow horse racing. And their CEO came out. He put in their kind of State of the Union horse racing address for 2024. They spoke about Game of Silks, which was really cool to see us get mentioned in there, and how they could talk about, this is the potentially the future of growing the sport. When you look at games like Game of Silks, I like to compare us to DraftKings in a sense that we hope to have that same effect. And this goes back to why, our founder started it. He loves horse racing, and right now in horse racing, there's not a lot of young people getting out to the track. It's an older demographic, so they want to grow it. And the way that they see getting younger people out to the track is the way to grow the sport. So one way is obviously the new technology, emerging technology, blockchain. But before, the NFL, before 2004, DraftKings came out with fantasy football. The NFL was really hurting for viewership. Their numbers were bad. And then fantasy football came out, and everybody started playing fantasy football. And because of that, people started watching football. And pretty much anybody who you ask in the US if they're watching football, if they play fantasy sports, they play fantasy sports, and that's what got them to watch football. So we hope to have that effect on horse racing, is really building the fandom through a game and then growing the sport of horse racing. And if we can grow the sport of horse racing, then, that is also going to benefit us.
Absolutely. Amazing. And this year, 2024, what excites you the most about this year for the Game of Silks? Anything in the pipeline that you'd love to share with the community today?
I mean, we recently just launched our season 2, so I'm super excited for that. We, in the past, we just had 1 year, so one age group of horses running. So now we're going to have 2 years, 2 age groups of horses running. So, potentially double or triple the amount of horses racing this year than there were last year. So a lot more action, which I'm excited for. And we just launched our marketplace as well with the start of season 2. So before this, again, if you wanted to trade assets on the secondary market, you had to go to OpenSea or Magic Eden or Blur, use one of those. The great marketplaces, but having a little bit of a customized marketplace where you could do some more research on the actual product, I think always is good. So we got that out. It's pretty good for where we're at right now, and I'm super excited for all the kind of things we're working on building it and fully flushing it out over the next 6 months. And once we have a good marketplace, that's really usable, I think that'll be helpful for all the users who already own horses in our game, and make it easier for new players to find horses when they're coming in. So
absolutely,
that's what I'm excited for. And
nice. Is there anything I haven't asked or we haven't touched on that you'd like to touch on today, Matt?
We've talked about our partnerships. We've talked about breeding. We've talked about my come up and involvement in Game of Silks. I'm trying to think of anything else. Not much. I guess I could just have a general say to everybody else, if you are interested in getting involved in Game of Silks, honestly, you come to our website, you check us out, but the first step is just turn on your TV and watch a horse race around you and kind of experience it, and pick a horse that you think will win and just watch the race. It's really fun experience, and and
now you can actually own that horse if you wanted to. Nice. Well, thanks, Matt. It's been a lot of fun learning about Game of Silks and your journey. I'm sure the community will appreciate it when it comes out. Thanks for taking the time, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.